Hello, everybody. Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Today it is the 6th of July, 2022. It is Wednesday afternoon. On today's show, the latest in conference realignment news. Also, we answer your questions as well on the weekly mailbag, and we will take a look at the names of the players who will be at Big 12 Media Days coming up next week. So a whole lot to get to on today's show.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Once again, Josh Neighbors here, Locked On Big 12 podcast. Thank you guys for making Locked On Big 12 your first listen every single day. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel. We have been killing it recently, just got over 1,000. We're above 1,200 now on the subscribers, so make sure you guys subscribe. Go get the podcast also wherever you guys get your podcast. And if you can't watch us on YouTube, you can always listen on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of those places. Today is going to be a mixed bag. Also, it looked like it's, I'm dying of heat. AC is broken in the house. So face gets red because I'm talking, because I'm fired up, and also because it's very, very hot in my house and the AC is not working. So a whole lot to get to today. I mean, The latest on the realignment front comes from John Wilner. If you guys do not follow John Wilner, he is a must follow right now. Nobody covers the Pac-12 like Wilner does, and he's somebody that we have on SiriusXM Pac-12 radio all the time to talk about what's going on in the world of Pac-12. And so obviously he is intimately familiar with what's going on right now. So the latest thing that we saw this morning was John said 11:41 a.m. Eastern time, so around 10:41 Central, and then obviously West Coasters, so 8:41. I know there's a mix of people watching these. I've seen you all in the comments, so we have a little bit of everybody watching. A source told John Wilner, quote, "I'd be stunned if Washington and Oregon go to the Big Ten. The Big Ten will sit back for 2 years, then try to get Notre Dame. And that's the end of the quote. Growing reality is the Ducks and Huskies have to, 1, make it work in the Pac-12, or 2, join the Big 12. My guess, 1, is their preference." So that's what. So John thinks that Oregon and Washington want to make. And look, John's saying it's his guess, right? Their preference would be to make it work in the Pac-12. I think that makes a lot of sense. Just think about that on its face. Just think about the idea of, do Oregon and Washington want to join the Pac-12? No, they don't. Do they want to join the Big Ten, generally speaking? I don't think they did either. I think obviously with what's happening now, a lot of this stuff is being forced on schools who are not USC and UCLA and Oklahoma and Texas. And these are still two really big name schools that drive in a lot of television revenue and are desirable assets for multiple reasons. They don't want to move. Obviously realities are shifting, but I think John's pretty much spot on here. I think 1 is their preference, but preference does not mean reality. We all know that, right? So this becomes a waiting game. And I tweeted this out yesterday at LO Big 12 on Twitter is our Twitter account. You guys can find us there. But I was joking when I said, by tonight, are we going to have at least 16 or 15 plus, whatever I said, teams in the Big 12? And people said, oh, no, I think it's going to take longer. I was being facetious in a way just because everything's moving so fast right now. I think that some collection of Utah, Arizona State, and Colorado, I think maybe you're going to find different attitudes right now. I bet there are a lot of people, some athletic departments, some people who are fans right now who are thinking, let's jump faster. Let's go now. Let's make sure we don't, stay around for all of this. I think there are also some people, some schools, and you could include Washington and Oregon in this too, that are more apt to say, all right, let's see what this next Pac-12 television contract looks like. They have gotten the green light to go and negotiate now a new TV contract. Now, this has to be noted when we discuss this. What this means is that I believe it's ESPN and Fox have 30 days to be kind of the exclusive ones who are in talks with the Pac-12. Then it gets opened up to everybody. Now, George Kliavkoff has expressed interest multiple times about having their conference, and I've mentioned it a whole lot. I've heard him say it. This is true. Now, things might have changed, but he said he wants the Pac-12 to be on cable and also to be visible. I think one complaint that Pac-12 schools have had, and this is one thing the Big 12 actually does offer, is games happening earlier in the day in better time slots. And the obviously the big one here being there's a lot of people in the Pac-12, obviously their commissioner is included in that, who are tired of seeing those late night games. Some of your better brands might be playing there 3, 4, 5 times a year, right? You might have your USCs on at 11 p.m. Eastern time, 10 p.m. Eastern time, right? That's not, and I know USC's gone now. I mean, we talked about OU, but the noon games being an issue for them, although noon games do some good ratings depending on where they are. That was before an expressly said goal from George Kliavkoff. Now, the big question that I think we're all trying to parse here is, has that changed? Where does desires for time slots fit in? If an Apple TV Plus came into the Pac-12 after that 30 days initially, and they said, look, we'll overpay for your product because we're desperate to have this on. Now, I don't think that's going to happen because I don't, if it does, it's going to be a short-term contract, right? I don't see anybody backing up the Brinks truck for multiple years to the Pac-12. I know it sounds obvious, but even if they're not backing up the Brinks truck, and by that I mean giving them an absurd sum of money, I don't think we're going to see a situation where, even if it's not absurd, I don't think we're going to see a long-term TV contract for the Pac-12. I think a lot of us are thinking that the contracts are going to go kind of now in 5-year increments just because of the changing media landscapes constantly. That's not even like a college. I mean, that might be a college football is changing thing, but think about how fast media is changing. Think about the fact that there is Peacock, Paramount, Paramount Plus, that are both connected to major networks. ESPN Plus is obviously connected to ESPN, which is also a major network. These places are beginning to have their own streaming places, or their own streaming apparatuses, their own streaming services that they can put games on. And what is Apple TV Plus? Think about this. They just paid for MLS and really paid for MLS because they want to drive subscriptions, because they know that, look, there is a dedicated MLS fan base that's going to watch their games no matter what. And now they have to do so on that platform. The UFC did a great job with this when they went or ESPN did a great job with this, when they put ESPN Plus, or UFC rather, on ESPN Plus. Yes, the pay-per-views, you have to exclusively buy them through ESPN Plus. There's no other way to do it. Also, if you want to watch a lot of their fight night cards, they're all available on ESPN Plus. Well, I was an intern for SiriusXM Fight Nation. I'll tell you what, there is a dedicated fan base, much like there is a dedicated fan base across our college sports that have no problem. I mean, they don't like it, but they pony up. And so that is something to watch here is, okay, can the Pac-12 survive? Because there might be entities out there that are so hungry to get into the live sports space that they overpay for a product that we're not really sure what the value is going to be. I say all of this to think, okay, because the Pac-12 is exploring expansion and because the Pac-12 is exploring their options with television, does this put Utah, Arizona, Colorado, and Arizona State into a holding pattern? That's my question, because it felt like things were moving fast, and it felt, I know the reports all over the place, but is everybody going to slow down here and take a breath before we make our next big moves, before we do the next big thing? We have to see. But I think that's the big question here is, all right, what is a timetable for, because it felt like it's kind of not now or never, but because there's so much momentum right now, we're kind of thinking, how fast does this happen? If you're Colorado, if you're Utah, if you're Arizona, and if you are Arizona State, now jumping to the Big 12 would actually force Oregon and Washington's hand. At that point, because I mentioned, remember, the original thing was John Wilner had talked about this. Their preference is probably to remain in some way a Pac-12 and trying to expand that and then waiting for the Big 10. what's going to happen, in my opinion, is that if this were to go down like this, if Utah, if Utah, Colorado, and then 2 Arizona schools jumped, the Pac-12 is then left at 6. There is no way, shape, or form in which they could construct a legitimately desirable television package that way. That is why I think the Big 12 is a bit more appealing, because the Pac-12 is at 10. The Big 12 is at 12 with 2 schools leaving. They are at 12. They know for sure they're going to be at 12. It's an inviting prospect. And look, it's also a lot of schools much like those 4 schools that were kind of left out at left at the kind of the altar, if you will. And if Utah, Arizona State, and Colorado left, in my opinion, it would force Oregon and Washington's hand a bit quicker. And would they want to wait to see what's going to happen with the Big Ten, or would they want to go? I mean, the Big Ten and Notre Dame was a big thing, and John Wilner is saying here that he thinks it's going to wait. So all this stuff we have to manage, but I do think there's a chance that, I mean, you talk about 6 schools leaving a 12-school conference. Like, what are we talking about at that point? Because I think if you left, then you'd have Washington State, Oregon State, Cal, and Stanford would be your 6 remaining Pac-12 schools. There's some decent brands in there. I've seen a lot of you all in the comments. There are a lot of people who think pretty highly of Cal and Stanford as institutions, and have a desire for that. So I think, that would force their hand. I mean, at a 16 league at that point, it's over. That conference is done. It's sunk. So do these schools want to wait around for trying to find a negotiation? Also, if you're going to leave, now's a great time, because they're exploring those options. I don't think there's any buyout for them. There's nothing they have to pay to leave the league. They're allowed to go. So this is kind of the iron being hot, if you will. Time to make a transition. Now would be the time. And that is why I've kind of been saying this makes sense. But we might have to put the brakes on this, because they're exploring expansion. I think SMU would be a target for them. That's kind of the team that I think makes sense, so they can, kind of expand their profile. Memphis, Boise State, San Diego State, probably Fresno as well, might be in there. But is that enough? I don't know. I mean, I'm of the mind that, like, Oregon and Washington, the Big 12 offers them something different. No, the Big 12 does not offer anything close to what the Big 10 can offer, but it's going to offer you a chance to be competitive. And here's the thing. You could sign your grant of rights over for 3-4 years and still have the ability to leave the league at some point in the Big 12, at some point in time down the road. So maybe as a short-term fix, they leave, they join the Big 12, and try to make that jump later, because it seems like the Big 10 right now is kind of like, all right, we're good. The next thing that we want is going to be Notre Dame. That's the next target for us. And then we'll see what happens. The ACC schools, obviously, I think there's a lot of talk about them. But our big question is, all right, how legit are these talks about them, their schools being able to get out of that television deal? We saw the sources that say they could fight it out in court. I think that becomes a very interesting issue, and I'm not so sure on that front. So we got to watch this very closely. I mean, we got to watch this very, very closely. I know all of you all are out there, but I think that's the next thing that I'm considering at this point in time. Is, all right, could Colorado, Arizona, and Arizona State and Utah force Oregon and Washington's hand to make a move if the Big 12 was able to poach them in short order pretty quickly, or not even short order? I mean, even if they wait a month and go and get them, would that force the move? We'd have to see. And I know it's been known that, Phil Knight's making calls on Oregon's behalf. So obviously a lot to suss out there, but I think it's a talking point maybe we haven't hit on too much. The fact that those smaller schools as a group of 4 could force the hand, because expansion, in my opinion, is off the table if you lose 6 of the Pac-12 schools. I mean, you've lost half the league right there if that were to happen. All right, quick word from the sponsor, then we'll hit your all's questions. Today's show is brought to you by rockauto.com. Go to rockauto.com today. When you guys do, you guys can check out their they got a full catalog of parts, whether it's a daily driver, a work truck, whatever you got. rockauto.com has got you covered. With an ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's more difficult to shop at your local chain store for the parts that you need. You got to answer questions like, is your Odyssey an LX? Is it an EX? I mean, who the heck knows? Who the heck cares? the best place to go is rockauto.com. Go to rockauto.com. You'll spend 30, 50, even 100% less than you would at a chain store or a car dealership. Family-run business, serving auto parts customers online for 20 years. Go to rockauto.com today. Amazing selection, always low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. That's rockauto.com. All right, so 3 questions that we've got this week from you all, and also let you guys know every single week I'll put something now, probably on Thursday, or you guys can comment on any of them. I will see them, but the mailbag in the community tab. If you guys go to the community tab on our YouTube page, at that place, I'll have send us your questions for the weekly mailbag, and you guys can send them in. And so we've got 3. So let's go with let's stay on the expansion thing. And let's see, this says, any chance on us moving to the SEC, say next year, Sooners, that is, from D Gizzy, I believe is who sends that in. So this is a topic that we've talked about a little bit, but I think it bears mentioning again. Barry Trammell, really good article over at the Oklahoman about the idea of, hey, Fox is starting up their new Big Ten with USC and UCLA in 2024. Could that spur on Texas and OU to make that call? Now, the one thing that we know for Texas, or one thing that we've heard basically for Texas, is that if Texas wanted to write the check right now, they could. That's pretty consistent with, I feel like, what we've watched at Texas, just the obscene amount of money. So if Texas wanted to write that check now, they could do it. And obviously that excess fee, we talked about, it's going to be pretty steep. But there is the idea that they could write that right now. Oklahoma, there's been some questions about that. I think overall the SEC, Mickey Mouse, and I mean Disney by that, ABC, ESPN, the TV partners are driving all of this. So this is not a matter of, do OU and Texas want to go earlier? This is not even a matter of, does Greg Sankey want them to go earlier? Does Nick Saban or the power brokers at Alabama and Auburn and Florida and Georgia, do those people want them? It's not even that. This is completely and purely, do the television execs at ESPN want this to happen simultaneously with the Big Ten Conference? Or they could even beat them to the punch if they get them out 2 years earlier. I've told y'all before, I've got no clue now. It feels like nobody has any clue now just because of the way things are changing. But if you're the SEC, to me, it was before, it was buy them out in 23 or do it in 25, right? No reason to pay unless you just got it on hand, no reason to pay the exit fees for 1 year, getting them a year earlier. 2 years earlier, and I especially think now, 2 years earlier, the value is 100% there, right? There is value in putting together now the Big Ten's going to make a ton of money too, but the SEC that, can be that number 1 power conference and put the whole shebang together shorter. Will it cost them? Yes. In the long run, will it be better for them? Probably too, but they can kind of make that happen before. And obviously, we'll see what happens with the Big 12, but I think it might be in their interest to take that financial offer and give, and I think it kind of gives you a bit more leverage to negotiate that buyout and say, all right, well, we know you guys want to put this thing together faster. So you guys give us a bit more money. We know you want to beat the Big Ten. We know you're on a clock, or at least want to be tied with them. That could drive up the value, I think, of the buyout, something just to maybe consider there. I could be wrong about that. I could be wrong about a lot of this stuff, but I think it's an interesting thought. Just think about it. 2024 season is when UCLA and USC join. ESPN has the opportunity to beat them to the punch of a full, talk about the Power 2 leagues, and be that power league before then if they make this done, so they get this deal done. So this could work in the Big 12's advantage to maybe negotiate a higher buyout or a dollar figure that I'm not sure we thought would be there before. All right, this is a last expansion-related thing that we will talk about. Which Big 12 schools would be most appealing for a potential super conference? And that's from Brian H794. Good question, Brian. I've talked about this a bunch about, hey, what does a super conference league look like? Well, I tend to think that it's going to be kind of, I don't think it's just going to be 40 schools. I could be wrong about this, but I think there is a desire to put together kind of something in the range of 60 schools. I think that makes a lot more sense because somebody has to take L's in this thing. And also, I think there is a certain degree, and I've talked about this a lot, but can you disenfranchise what percentage of the FBS fan bases could you disenfranchise before it costs you? I know it's about television markets, and the big markets will be included in this. But, and I've mentioned this before, I'm going to keep mentioning this. There is a reason that we watch, there is a dream, right? That if you're an Iowa State fan, it's actually almost become a reality, right? I mean, people thought they could make the college football playoff, but if you're an Iowa State fan, you're watching Alabama against Auburn. If you're an Oklahoma State fan, you're paying attention to the Cincinnati game, right, to see what would happen in also the SEC championship game. You're paying attention to that because if Georgia wins, Alabama gets KO'd, and that means a spot could open up for either Baylor or for Oklahoma State. Think about it from that perspective. That I'm just speaking on this year, the college football playoff. That goes away in an exclusive league, right? If Baylor's not there, if Oklahoma State's not there, if Cincinnati, is not there, right? That kind of thing is going to go away. And at that point, are you, as college football fans, I want to know, still going to watch these games if they've totally KO'd your team's involvement in this? Are you going to be just a general college football fan? Like, that viewership is really going to drop. It's going to drop off in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I don't think an entire fan base of Oklahoma State fans are going to check out the college football playoff if their school is no longer involved in that sport. If you're an NFL fan and you watch, I'm a fan of the Washington football team. I still watch the playoffs, right? Because every single year, the winner of the NL in the NL East, the winner of the conference, of the division rather, is going to be in the playoffs, right? And Washington has been in that spot recently. We have a seat at the table. And with college football playoff expansion coming, hey, it feels like everybody, it felt like for a while we'd actually get more access to this thing. Well, if you just don't have an NFL team and you're just a football fan, sure, you go ahead and watch. But there's a reason why the Super Bowl rates so well. In the big playoff games rate so well in the NFL. The common people are coming to watch. NFL is the biggest sport in this country. But are you going to watch these games if you don't have a dog in this fight, or it's not possible for you to get there? Think about it. What is a sport then? Why do you care as much if your team can't make it into that? If it's a 12-team playoff and they say your team can't make it, go to hell. I'm not going to watch that. Why would I watch that, right? If Utah and Cincinnati, I mean, think about this. Cincinnati, Oklahoma State, and teams, Baylor, and Utah, teams that were playing in New Year's Six games, Iowa State recently, that have been ranked in the top 10 of a college football playoff poll, that at the end of the year, once we look back at the poll, were top 12 teams that would have been included. That makes me care. I'll watch your sport now. Cincinnati made it. That should give everybody hope. I'm more interested in the playoff now because I know more schools from other places can go. If that goes away, what are we talking about here? Is viewership going to go down? So this goes back to the original question. If we're talking about teams that you'd want to pilfer, I mean, I'm still of the belief that Oklahoma State has been built into a top 20 football, top 25, and probably even top 20 football program recently. I think Baylor in Texas, man, 3 separate coaches have pushed that thing to a really good level. Don't love Art Briles as a guy. Did a great job there coaching the football part, not managing people. Did a good job as a coach. Matt Rule won at Baylor, took them to really, really high heights. And also Dave Aranda took them to really high heights, obviously, this year, winning the Big 12 and also winning a New Year's Six bowl game. So this is something where I think those schools are appealing. Does Cincinnati's just win make them appealing? I think Kansas is really appealing because of basketball, but I think you'd also make the argument, too, that Baylor is becoming that appealing with the hoops as well. So I think those schools, I will say the academics thing is something that's interesting, but I think the cultural stuff doesn't really matter anymore. I don't think the academic stuff matters as much anymore. We'll see if it does with the Big Ten. I think that could be there, but I think those schools come to my mind. So Kansas for a basketball purpose. I think Oklahoma State and Baylor because of where they're positioned and how well that they've done recently. Maybe TCU because they're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I don't know. But, they would have taken these schools if they wanted them really badly. Now, to go back to the Bud Elliott thing, like I do think they need 20 some teams to fill this thing out. And once again, the Big 12's best chance to get invited to some kind of 60 team league is adding, and we're going to add kind of the leagues together. We're going to do multiple leagues, and it's not just one super league. I think that's a big thing we have to watch too. I think these conferences have so much pride. They want to stand as their own thing that we're not going to see all these mergers. They might form the alliances to create the overall 60 team association, but I don't think it's going to happen I'm not sure it's going to be one homogenous body. I don't see that happening. So what is the Big 12's best chance of getting into that? Being a strong league, still competing, obviously trying to get into the playoff. I mean, they're adding a team that was in the playoff. And also they can add the 2 Pac-12 teams in Oregon and Washington that got into the college football playoff before. So that is right there also. But if you're asking current Big 12 schools, you got to think Oklahoma State and Baylor just because of the success they've had the last decades. I mean, Mike Gundy's gotten that thing rolling beyond a decade. So I think that's there. All right, one last question from Sam Bushert, and Sam asks us, what are your favorite Big 12 football stadiums / environments? Now, some of you all know I am an East Coaster, so, I'm heathen, sorry. But I love this league, you guys know, and the one place I've actually been able to go recently was West Virginia, Millen-Pusker Stadium. Fun, I really enjoy it. Good atmosphere, it was hot as hell, so you had people kind of passing out in the stands, and it was a noon kickoff between Tech in West Virginia. You put that thing on a Thursday night, and that's going to be an absolute madhouse. So I know the atmosphere could have been better. It was still very good on that day of that game. Oklahoma State, to me, is one on TV that really has looked so strong. Boone Pickens Stadium, y'all, has looked really strong on TV to me. I think the environments have been really good. It's been a tough place to go and win. Jack Trice looks like it's one hell of a party and looks like it is a lot of fun. So I would say when people ask me about environments, and also Texas Tech, Jones AT&T Stadium, I mean, at night, tortillas flying, that place is crazy. Not the biggest stronghold maybe in the world. Like if we're talking about an environment that imposes fear. I mean, it's not easy, but you can go into Tech and win at night. And we'll see if Joey McGuire can kind of change that. But I think it's still an awesome environment. So if you want a big 3 right now, I would say, definitely big 3, I'd say Matt Campbell's Jack Trice. He's turned that into a really fun place to go and tough place to win. So I would go with that. I would go also with Boone Pickens. That's kind of the number 1 out of all of these. I think we're going to discount OU in Texas. And then third, I'll go Jones AT&T, maybe in a tie with Milan-Pusker. I have to say, though, I have not been to Baylor's new stadium. I have not been to McLean. And that place is becoming a more difficult place to win. So this list could change very quickly, but those are just some venues that I have thought of. All right, one more word from our sponsors, then we'll get out of here on today's show. We are brought to you by Built Bar. Go to built.com today. That's built.com. Use the promo code LOCK15. That's LOCKED15 LOCK15 for 15% off on your first order at built.com. They've got Built Go. They've got Built Boost. They've got Built Bars. They've got Built Puffs. They've got the new coconut brownie chunk puff. It sounds delicious. It is delicious. I've tried it. Very good. Go to built.com today. Once again, promo code LOCK15. All right. So we did get the announcement of who is going to be going for each school to the Big 12, representing the Big 12. We did just get the all Big 12 teams. Those came out. I'm not going to do that today. I'll save that for tomorrow just because it deserves its own episode. But we did get the players going. So for Baylor, Dylan Doyle, Bryson Jackson, both linebackers, as well as tight end Ben Sims. At linebacker for Iowa State, it's O'Ryan Vance. We will be getting one of the best receivers in the conference in Xavier Hutchinson. He will be accompanied by Trevor Downing. So Vance, Hutchinson, and Downing, your 3 for Iowa State. 4 from Kansas, Kenny Logan, the outstanding safety. Jalen Daniels, the presumed starting quarterback. Devin Neal, the running back who had a really good year last year. And then Earl Bostic Jr., offensive lineman. For Kansas State, this is a really strong lineup. Adrian Martinez, the quarterback. So many questions about how he will assimilate into things in Manhattan. Deuce Vaughn, the running back for Kansas State. Daniel Green, the linebacker, and Eli Huggins, the defensive tackle. Those are your 4 for Kansas State who will be going to media day. For Oklahoma, Ethan Downs, a defensive end, Woody Washington, cornerback, Dylan Gabriel, the quarterback, and then Marvin Mims, your wide receiver. For the Oklahoma State Cowboys, the runners-up last year in the Big 12 Conference, Spencer Sanders, a quarterback, will be there with wide receiver Brennan Presley, and the two ends of that really good defensive line, Brock Martin and Tyler Lacey, will also be there. For TCU, it's the tremendous center Steve Oliva. He'll be joined by Travius Hodges Tomlinson, the cornerback. Quentin Johnston, the wide receiver, will be there, and also Will D. Winters, their linebacker. The Texas Longhorns, it's two running backs. It's Roshan Johnson and Bijan Robinson. I'm not going to say arguably, because it is the best backfield in the Big 12. And then DeMarvion Overshone, the linebacker, will be there, as well as defensive end Obi Ogofo. I think it's Gofo. That's how I pronounce it right. Texas Tech, Caleb Rogers, the offensive lineman, along with wide receiver Miles Price, who looks like he'll take that next step, or they're hoping he'll take the next step this year. On defense, there are two outstanding players at linebacker, Tyree Wilson, and then Dadrian Taylor Demerson, the defensive back. Last and certainly not least, West Virginia, Bryce Ford Wheaton, wide receiver, will be joined by Zach Frazier, the offensive lineman, Dante Stills, defensive end, and Charles Woods at cornerback. So July 13th through 14th, Big 12 Media Days presented by Old Trapper. That will be the guys that you see there. And I've just got I'm looking at the teams right now for all Big 12. And so we will see how these things shake. I'll let you guys know about this tomorrow as well, but we'll really focus on that. Thanks for watching the show today. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at LO Big 12. It is 3:26 on July 6th as we wrap this up. So if news changes, I apologize. It'll come out on June 7th, but had to record it due to some things going on tomorrow. So appreciate you guys sticking with that. So hopefully the news does not become old. But find us on Twitter at LO Big 12. You guys can find me at Josh Neighbors _. Find the show wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube as well. Till next time, my friends, as always, stay safe.